entire UFO phenomenon over the past 20 years.
All right, guys, welcome back to Total Disclosure. My name is Ty, and I'm your host. Today, we have a great show for you. It is part of our listener or community experiencer volume. So this is the second incarnation of such, and I'm super excited to have Teresa Tindal here. She is a former UFO lobbyist, one of the first in Washington, D.C. to register and to be a lobbyist of this topic, such as of Stephen Bassett and really the people that paved the way for what we're doing now and all of the congressional involvement and the DC involvement and all the bills that are being passed. I mean, it can all be really traced back to the original grassroots movement that started a long time ago, right? A long time before most of us got into the community. So we have a lot to learn from people like Teresa, like Stephen Bassett, like Richard Dolan, and all those who came before us. And it is our duty to grab the torch from people like them and run with it, because in this day and age we need to keep pressure on the government. And if today is anything to speak for that volume, I don't know what is. So again, she was also the former state director, and she's going to tell you all about that. Here is Teresa Tindal. Teresa, thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you for having me on, Ty. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So you're a MUFON state. So you MUFON. Of course, people know this as the Mutual UFO Network. They investigate cases. In your origin story, is that really, a pivotal organization? Is that how you get your start?
I think MUFON can be a really good way to learn a lot about what's happened, what is continuing to happen. It's a good way to network. MUFON is a good organization. There are complaints about it, and I understand those. Nothing's going to be perfect, but it's a purely civilian-run organization. It is the oldest civilian-run UFO organization that's also globally based. It has the largest civilian database of UFO sightings and experiences going back to like the 1960s, I believe.
Yeah.
It's a pretty important organization. And I was the Maryland MUFON director. And then prior to that, I was a field investigator in Virginia and Kentucky, and a MUFON member for over 15 years.
Well, and that experience with MUFON, being a field investigator, being boots on the ground, what was that like? And did it grow your fascination in the topic? Is that where you aside from your own experiences, which we'll get into later, is this really where you figure out that this is really happening?
Yeah, I think it's a great way for, a lot of experiencers feel very alone and very isolated. And it's a fantastic way to find camaraderie, to know that you're not nuts, you're not crazy, you're not imagining things. And I think that's probably what draws most people to MUFON initially. And then if you want to go further and you have the time, you can become a field investigator. You have to work for it. You have to study for it. You have to go to trainings. You don't just buy a book. It's actually pretty extensive training, and I learned a lot. and then working cases was pretty fascinating. I did it for years and years, and then as a state director, I was able to see all of the cases that were coming in, and it really provides a broad spectrum view of and also in quite a lot of depth into a lot of these cases and what's happening. I saw incredible footage that people
Right.
would send in. Um, this stuff isn't made up, and I'm really glad to see that the stigma is being removed, because I've seen a lot of people, we've lost a lot of people to mental health issues because of feeling so isolated. And so I think and now we have UAP Med, which is fantastic. So you can go to your doctor and they don't think you're crazy. So I'm really happy to see the community kind of rallying around the experiencers more, so we don't lose more brothers and sisters, because it's a very isolating experience that our current culture doesn't really account for. I mean, a few hundred years ago, it would have been classified as religious phenomenon.
Mm.
And they would have had more of a context to put these experiences in. But because we're not really a religious society anymore, and we have materialistic scientific worldview, there hasn't really been a place to put these experiences, and that's very hard for people. So I do think MUFON is a good place for people to come together, and I certainly learned a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's a super, super positive way to put it. And let's rewind the clock. Um, what's your origin into the phenomenon? Because I think a lot of us have that moment, right? I hate to take this from James Fox, but it's like that moment of contact or moment of conversion, um, that leads us down the path that we that led us to this moment right now, having this conversation. So tell me about your early life, and um, how it all led up to having your experiences, and what those meant to you, and how it continues to drive you to this day.
Yeah, so the major UFO experience that I had was in 1989, when I was 10 years old in Tucson, Arizona. And I had come from a family of experiencers. Every generation of my family had had UFO experiences. So I kind of grew up hearing about it. Um,
Really?
yeah, I mean, some of the oldest stories that I remember, even as a toddler, I remember sitting outside with my grandma in New Mexico after dark looking for UFOs.
Huh.
Because everybody had, so I was aware that there was something, and I was pretty gobsmacked when I had my own experience at 10. So what happened to me was, it was just a regular day after school. And I was the latchkey kid, like most kids were. It was, 1989. A single working mom who was still at work and not home yet. And I was just inside my house, and I was actually standing next to the kitchen table, and I got a voice. It wasn't an auditory voice, it was in my head. And even as a 10-year-old, I recognized, well, this is very,
This
this is very strange. Yeah. And so
right.
the voice actually said to me, go outside and hit a bird with a rock. And even as a 10-year-old, I was like, what?
Huh.
First of all, I love animals. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to try to hit a bird with a rock. That's weird. Uh,
Yeah.
you know. Second, I couldn't even hit a bird with a rock if I wanted to, so that's dumb. And three, what the heck is this? This is somebody talking to, like, even at 10, I recognized, this is not me, my voice. What is this?
Right.
But I'm
Because
communicating back telepathically, like it's getting my thoughts. So we had probably like a 5-minute conversation in what was really about 20 or 30 seconds, because it was telepathic. And I think we have that capability now. I don't know that we had those capabilities in 1989. I've heard my grandmother had a similar experience in the 1950s. I don't know that we had those capabilities in the 1950s. And this sort of telepathic communication thing goes all the way back to the Bible. We can talk about that later. So I went back
Absolutely.
and forth. I went back and forth with this voice in my head that wanted me to go hit a bird with a rock. I said, I
Yeah.
know I'm not doing that. And then it seemed kind of rushed, actually. And finally it said, okay, well, just go out and lay in your front yard and look up. And I said, okay, well, I agree to do that. So I
That's
went out
something
in
I
the
can
front.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I can do. I'm not going to hurt an animal. I'm not going to throw rocks. Like, that's dumb. So, I mean, it's weird. I don't,
It's a
it's a,
weird detail, but it's one that isn't made up because it's so bizarre.
yeah, I'd be embarrassed to tell you. I mean, it's embarrassing to even say it because it's so weird. But when I look back now from a psych perspective, it's almost like that was a psychopath test. Will she hurt an animal? And then if I would have said, yes, I will hurt an animal. Oh, okay, well, forget it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's a good way to look at it.
that is the only kind of sense I can
A
make out of
morality
being
waiver. Yeah.
commanded to go hurt an animal with a rock, and I refused immediately because I don't. What is the purpose of that? It was bizarre. So I went outside. I said, okay, yes, I agree. That's something I can do. I can go and lay down in the front yard and look up. And anybody who's been in Arizona, they know that you don't really have lawns, you have gravel. So I laid down in the gravel front yard. I'm a kid and I'm making, snow angels in the gravel, just looking up or whatever. I don't know what to expect. And it really wasn't very long. It was maybe a minute or two. It wasn't very long. And a gold disc came into my view. It was traveling west to east over Tucson, Arizona. And it's not like I was in the country. I was in a suburban neighborhood on the east side of Tucson. And this gold disc, I saw it come into my view over the rooftops. And this was daytime. It was about sunset. And it was clearly gold.
I
And sunset would have been on the opposite side, so there's no way that was reflecting on the side that I was looking at. It was a gold disc, which is,
okay. Because
yeah. And
that's what I was gonna ask. Because could it have been fully like a fully reflective material that was bouncing the dust? Like the sunlight at that hour is like orangey.
right.
So,
Yeah, no,
but you're saying no.
I was seeing the east side of the disc and the sun was setting on the west side.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I mean, it was clearly gold. And, gold disc reports are very unusual. And I know that because of experience, and I've looked through the databases. But when you look throughout history, they're actually the most common. And we can get into that later
Flaming
if you
the
want.
flaming shields that
Yes.
the Romans saw, right? That could be a
The,
good example.
the flaming shields, the sun discs, I
The
actually had
sun
the great.
disk, yep.
Yeah, I had a great opportunity to speak with the British theologian who actually did his PhD on sun disk worship. And I just brought up, I thought, oh, this guy's going to think I'm nuts, but I'm going to go for it. And I said to him, do you think there's a chance that they were seeing otherworldly craft and they were gold and they just called them sun discs because that was the language they had at the time? He
Yeah.
actually told me yes, that he thought that
Well,
that was a really good possibility because I was prepared for, you're crazy and please block me. And that's not how it happened. And you can actually find a lot of the gold disc symbology. I mean, I've traced it. I just did a big MUFON presentation on this. I mean, it goes all the way back to ancient Egypt with the Eye of Ra, the sun discs, like you said, the flaming shield. I mean, Japan is known as the land of the rising sun because of the sun goddesses, and that's the
Mm,
whole Shinto religion.
right.
Um,
Right.
so, anyways, so in history, there's a lot of gold discs. I didn't know that obviously at 10, but I do now. So this disc is flying over my head, and it's not doing any crazy maneuvers. It's not like zigzagging around, doing flips. There's no fancy lights. It
There's
just is.
no so bring me back to the gravel. Was there any
But
static was there any static in the air? Was there any low frequency humming?
there was nothing. It silently glided overhead.
Okay.
Um, and very slowly. It was not like zipping. And it was the typical sort of raised on the top gold disc. And actually, I just about had a heart attack. I was watching National Geographic with my child, and the Temple of 1 million Golden Buddhas in Thailand, Wat Phra Dhammakaya. Anybody can look it up. They have a temple made out of 1 million golden Buddhas in the
Mhm.
shape of a gold disc
Of a
that
literally looks like a UFO.
literally looks like a UFO. And it is the largest religious complex in the world. It's even larger than Vatican City. So they're obviously expecting a big turnout there. Um,
Yes. Have you
so
seen the videos of the people in there? How many people they get in there?
yeah, yeah,
It's
it's a huge place.
incredible.
Yeah, it's a huge place for Buddhist pilgrimage. So there's something to that gold disc shape, and they're aware of it. So I saw this
Do-
gold disc. It was gliding overhead, and it just glided overhead. And my best friend lived next door, and I wanted her to see it. I ran next door, but by the time she got to the door, it was already off in the distance, and she could see that there was something there, but she couldn't see the specifics, like I had. But she could see that there was something there, and it continued to glide east over Tucson, Arizona, towards the mountain. There's a mountain, it's surrounded by mountain ranges,
Mhm.
towards the mountain range. And then it sort of seemed to cut off southernly as it approached that mountain range to go around the mountains, and that was it. That was the beginning. uh, that was the beginning. And then I started thinking back as I came across more and more cases. Some of them would resonate with me, and then I started to realize, well, whoa, I kind of had some strange unexplained experiences even prior to that, that I just didn't have any place. I didn't have a folder to put them in. Like when I was 5 years old, I don't, okay. I understand how crazy this sounds. But this is a pretty historical. You can see it even in Christian biblical texts. When I was 5 years old, I saw a disembodied hand come out from like behind the wall of the kitchen. I was sitting on the couch and there was a wall, and I saw a man's hand come out and give like a thumbs up like that. And it
Really?
just and it yes. And it just seemed to and I remember it was a blue flannel shirt, and the sleeve was rolled up.
Like
And I
this?
told the arm stuck out from behind the kitchen wall, like giving me a thumbs up like that.
Okay, so
Yeah.
like
And it
that.
was low level. It wasn't high in the air. I was a 5 year old sitting on the couch, so it was about at my eye level, and it was a thumbs up like this.
See,
And my mother, my mother came in, and I told her, and it really scared her. And I remember her telling me, "Teresa, you're scaring me." And I said, "Well, Mom, I'm scared too." She thought there was a man in the house. I did too. It was scary, but that's actually a thing. And it's called the hidden hand. And then if you look into this, gets into a whole nother thing with Masonic stuff and all of that. you'll see them with the hand like this in their jacket. That represents the hidden hand. And that maybe, I don't know. I just know it happened. So that was the UFO. So those things happened. The UFO experience happened. But then very shortly after that, I began to have prophetic dreams. And that has gone on for my entire life. And I developed an ESP ability also. And there's also been that voice has continued. And it's
Right.
actually saved my life on more than one occasion. I mean, it even told me when Hurricane Katrina was going to come. Uh, I was on the Biloxi, Mississippi Gulf Coast prior to Hurricane Katrina, and it even warned me about Katrina about 2 months in advance. And I was married to a colonel at the time, an Air Force colonel, and I told him, I said, "There's a storm coming," and he didn't believe me. And I actually left. I left him. I left Biloxi. I packed up my dog, and I said, "I'm getting out of here because I know this thing is coming." And sure enough, a few weeks later, I think it was end of October, beginning of November, Katrina hit. And so it's just been a pattern like that throughout my entire life. And
Wow.
that's typical.
That's like that, because that is also something that we see in other accounts, like this voice that, you know, your voice seems to be there all the time, but you, like, as in, like, you have access to it uh, a lot more. But like, people often say that, if let's give an example. Like, they're on the highway and they look down for a second and they veer off, and something says, "Look up." And at the last minute, they look up and avoid like a terrible car wreck that would have killed them and three other people, right? This is something that we hear.
Yeah,
I
and
know because I've had it.
oh, you've experienced it too. See, people
Yes.
who experienced it, they know. And then when you experience something that extraordinary, you either deny it, and so and but for me, my fire was so lit. I started researching UFOs at 10 years old, and I've been doing that
Mhm.
now for 34 years. I'm 44. And so as I went through, high
Well,
school,
you
college.
don't look a day over 25.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is really what influenced my entire education. I got a bachelor of science in psychology, and then I began pursuing my doctorate in clinical psychology because I wanted to understand how 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 did that telepathy work
Mm.
in 1989. And now I think we do have that technology now. I don't know that we had that in 1989. We didn't even have home computers, barely. I mean, very few
Right.
people. uh, I mean, and we were playing Super Mario Brothers. We didn't have cell phones. And certainly in the 50s, my grandmother
I mean,
experienced,
yeah.
you
We're still
know,
talking Atari cartridges at the time.
right. So I'm not really sure that we had that capability then. And this is, if you're going to talk in religious terms, which there's a lot of overlap here, and I understand that may be controversial, but that it is. I mean, that's what it is. So historically in religious terms, that would have been referred to as the Holy Spirit, the
The
voice
Holy
of.
Spirit. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so that would have been referred to the voice or the gift of the Holy Spirit, because I mean, that's what it did, I mean, even this is and it's not just the Christian Bible. I'm just using this as an example because it's what most Western people and Americans are familiar with. But it happened to Mary and Joseph. Mary was told, "You're going to have a baby." And Joseph was told in a prophetic dream, "Mary's going to have a baby and you have to raise that baby." There were injuries. I mean, Saul was blinded on the road to Damascus. You know,
Hmm.
there, I think, I really do honestly believe that I'm quite certain that there has been an ancient advanced presence on this earth. Um, Now we could get into who that is. We could, but that we're speculating
Do you,
really.
let me ask you this. Do you think that there is a higher probability that what we refer to as gods are this same advanced species, or other advanced civilizations? Who knows how many are out there? um, do you think that, I mean, we know for a fact that what we can't understand or perceive, we often consider as magic, right? So, or like, uh,
Supernatural.
supernatural, yes.
Yeah.
So, could the name have just been changed through the years?
Absolutely. I think that's exactly what has happened. Because I think when you look back now on a lot of these great holy books, and again, not just the Bible, but so many of the Indian texts, and if you look back to ancient Mesopotamia, if you look back to, Gilgamesh, you look back to the
Mm.
oldest recorded history that we have, this is what they're talking about. And I think it's the same phenomenon. The language just changes as the worldview changes, and now, and I've heard a lot of people talk about this when they, after, if you shift your perspective just slightly, and you go back and you look at these scriptures from a scientific point of view, they're not so magical anymore. It's not so
No.
magical to have a man, in some kind of flying ship come down from the sky. Like that's not so mysterious and magical anymore. Um, so
Or a
I
fire breathing dragon.
right, yeah, yeah.
Right? Like a fire breathing dragon, that's a really good way to describe a craft that is exerting, so, a cylindrical craft that is exerting some sort of plume of fire, or, you know, some sort of, red color, that
Propulsion.
would,
Yeah.
yeah, propulsion. Whatever it is, it's just like, it all, when you look at it through this lens, it solves so many problems, or issues, in the mainstream way of our origin story, if you will.
It does, yeah. And so I've spent, after I left DC during the pandemic. Bassett and I had an office in the National Press Building, and we had everything ready. We were about to do the first video podcast out of DC on disclosure. We had the office, we had everything, we had the setup, we had everything, and then COVID hit. And everything got shut down. DC was really shut down, so that didn't work out. And after I left DC, I unregistered as a lobbyist, because there's actually a lot of work that goes into just maintaining your lobbying license. And I wasn't there anymore. And even then, when I was there, I realized I was hitting my head up against a wall. And then so I decided to switch my focus to historical um, studies, and specifically religious studies, and specifically religious art, because so many people were illiterate, so the art had to be able to really speak 1,000 words. I mean, and I can think of probably 100 just Christian paintings that clearly depict um, disc shaped objects with beams coming out of them. And if
Mhm.
you look at the Gnostic texts, which were discovered in the Nag Hammadi library, I believe in the 40s, One of them very specifically talks about Jesus was walking around in a beam of light, and it specifically says it gave the people a lot of anxiety. And what was his transfiguration on the mountain where he started to shine? Did a beam of light come down on him? And then when you look at what Jesus said, I'm not from here. My Father is in heaven. He spoke in parables, so it would be timeless. And
Right.
that really,
Right.
yeah, and one thing that really gets me, and I can't remember exactly which scripture is, but he said there, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said there are many rooms in my Father's house, and I go there to prepare them for you. And now that we know about exoplanets, is that what he was talking about?
Right. Because that would make, like, God. We would like to say that, like, even the Vatican has come out and said that they would, like, if there is other life, that they would, if they wanted to be baptized, they would do it. And I think, like, the view is that God paints with a broad brush, and that's what they're leaning into now, is the idea that he didn't just stop here, if there is a singular God.
Actually, I think there were probably multiple gods. If you look at Judaism, uh, so Sarah and Abraham were actually Sumerian. So a lot of the Old Testament are Sumerian stories, which are some of the oldest stories that we have, quite literally carved into stone.
Literally,
That
yeah.
Yeah, that made it into the Old Testament. And
Mhm.
you can look, I mean, you can just look all throughout. I really began to look at ancient Persia because that's where I found the most. And when I was studying ancient Persia, I was looking at the Zoroastrians. The Zoroastrians are actually in the Bible. Most people don't realize that. They were the Magi. Magi is a Zoroastrian priest. And then when you say, okay, if the Magi, and the symbol for Zoroastrianism is quite literally a bearded man in a gold disc with landing gear and wings. And if you look all throughout ancient Persia, which is now primarily Iran, it's
Yes.
everywhere. It's everywhere. It's even carved over the tomb of Xerxes, and Xerxes was a god king. And
Mm.
and so who were the royalty then? A lot of them were they had more of the genetics. We were interbred with. And I think that's pretty clear from a lot of the scriptures. The fallen angels, and then the
Bred
Nephilim
with.
of that,
Yeah.
and that continues to this day. And I think there's a good possibility, Jesus was a hybrid. I mean, if we just look, his father was not from here. His father was in
Mhm.
heaven.
By
So
definition, right? Kind of
by
an
definition, by
alien,
very
yeah.
definition, an angel and an alien have the same definition. They are not of this earth.
Yes.
Now whether they're angels or demons is a matter of perspective, and a matter of intention, and that's a philosophical debate, that and personal choice, but
But
there's still the same definition.
do you agree that we have a problem in government where there are people that are trying to hinder this process because they think that we're tapping into some sort of demonic, um and I know we're kind of diverting back, but that we're dealing with some sort of demonic force.
I think that they'll say that, but I think what the honest truth is, and this is something that Burchett has said.
Yes.
Yeah, and he actually, this is his terminology, the religious industrial complex. I was shocked to hear Burchett use that terminology because I would suspect that's his primary voting base. But yeah, they might say demons, but I think the real concern is that, this could completely topple the religious industrial complex, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry a year, and they
Mhm.
put a lot of money into candidates. There's a
Yes.
lot of political power, and there's a lot of money, and there's a lot of social power there. Um, and that's just one of the interests. I mean, there are, I could probably list off 50 interests if but that's just one of the interests, pertaining to the religious part that we just discussed, whether it's demonic. I mean, demonic, that intention is a matter of perspective. Is the lion evil for eating the gazelle? Well, from the perspective of the gazelle, so I
Yeah.
mean, those are philosophical debates that,
Well,
yeah.
my angle is that I don't think that your religious back your religious beliefs should hinder the advancement of studying this topic. I don't think that anyone's belief system, that's not how science operates, right? So, yes, there is components and they overlap, but we cannot bring our religious beliefs and into this topic in studying UFOs because um, there are, like I said, there are people who think we're tampering with something truly evil, and by instigating it, we're unleashing some sort of force upon the earth. And that sounds nonsensical to me.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, I think that's an excuse to not destroy the religious industrial complex, the military
Yeah.
industrial
Yeah.
complex. And it's not like we have any control over this anyway. I mean, if they're as powerful as if they are our creators, and they're responsible for the Egyptian gods, the Roman gods, the Greek gods, the Mayan gods. I mean, they're responsible for the Judaism, Christianity. I mean, all of them, Hinduism. If they are responsible for those religious for those religions, what we do really isn't going to factor in to what they do. I mean, it's just it's I don't believe that. I don't believe we have really any control. And I do believe that if they wanted to destroy us, they would have already done it. They apparently tried once with the flood, and
With the great flood that every culture talks about, in which every culture, we are told in school, did not have contact with each other.
yeah, and so that's very clearly documented. And and then Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, if you the sun is right in my eyes. It got right. I'm trying to
I
move.
can see it. Yeah, the rays.
Should we pause for me to? Can you edit it out if we pause and I close the shades?
Yeah,
Better.
good. I just created a marker at all
Let
right,
me just close
marker at
the shades.
41:57.
Okay. Yeah, I look like I have war paint on there. Let me. Okay. That's much better. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm ready to go again.
All right. So 42:21. Okay. So yeah, I do believe that um I do believe that Tim Burchett does say it best with the religious industrial complex. That's a very it's great verbiage. He's a good friend of mine. Um, we converse here and there. I've had him on the show, and he is such a warrior for truth. And I may not agree with on all of his politics, but he is certainly a champion and a warrior for this topic. And we need more people like him.
Yeah, actually there was a presser that just occurred about an hour before we started this podcast, and it was Burchett.
Which I think we were gonna. Did you want to watch it? A little bit of it?
Well, it's about 45 minutes long.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, but I can kind of just give you a rundown. I give you the Cliff Notes version. I watched about 20 minutes and then I got disgusted and turned it off. But it was Burchett, it was Luna, it was Gates. There were some other people, and the bottom line is they were saying, they were stunned that they requested. These are members of Congress, and they've requested these, some sort of information in these files, and Burchett specifically said that the intelligence community told him no. And then he said that he clarified, oh, you mean the Senate Intelligence Committee? And he said, no, the intelligence community shut us down. And so kind of their whole point,
Yes.
where is the democracy? This isn't a democracy when Congress can't get access to what they're asking for. So it raises a lot of questions and red flags about
Absolutely.
in DC, who controls things. It's supposed to be Congress, but they
If
can't even access what they're requesting. So do we still live in a democracy? This is very concerning.
Yeah, and I could not agree more. If there is some party, some faction inside the military, industrial, and private sector that can reach through the veil and single-handedly kill a bill and destroy it, that is not democracy. That is clear. That's clear foul play.
It is, and it's against our Constitution, and it's deeply concerning. But then the question becomes, well, what are you going to do about it? If the intelligence community has that much authority, what's anybody going to do? I mean, what do you write them a strongly worded letter? So this is
Short
a
of a civil
crisis.
war, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're in multiple
Proxy
constitutions.
wars and yeah.
Yeah.
I really want to get your thoughts on well, I want to keep that up here, but both of us up there as well. Sorry for anyone listening right now. No, this is definitely the best. All right. So with the Schumer Amendment, do you think that if that part of the NDAA of fiscal year 2024, if that segment of it does not pass, do you think that will set back the UFO topic for the foreseeable future?
No, and a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, and that's okay. But this is just my experience in informed perspective. I'm not looking to the government to give me permission about what I know
Mm.
to be true and what I believe.
Mhm.
Everybody is expecting this, capital D disclosure where the president's going to come out and give an announcement. Extraterrestrials are real, and that's it. And why though? I don't. Well, do we look to our government for permission to believe other things? No. And in fact, whatever they say, I usually believe the opposite of anyway. I was in DC for
Yeah,
20
I was gonna say
years,
the exact
so I don't
yeah.
I don't trust what they say anyway. And then whatever they do, they're only doing it to benefit them. They're not doing this because people want to know about extraterrestrial life and oh, we're going to give that to them. That's not what they do. And this also is not the purview of government. This really falls under the purview of philosophy, theology, religion, and exosciences. So I understand the enthusiasm everybody has for what's happening in Congress, but my expectations are, I mildly follow it. But why do I need these guys, to tell me what I've already read, in
Or
extremely ancient
heard in
text,
your own head.
or heard in my own head, or seen for myself, and read reports of thousands of other people who've had the same thing, going back all the way to the recorded history. So, there's been a phenomenon here. Tucker Carlson said this just this week. There has been a phenomenon here for 3,000 years. I don't need my government to tell me whether it's real or not. I can read for myself. And I suggest everybody does that. Go and do some of your own homework. One book I really recommend right now is The Ancient Gods of the Bible by Mauro Biglino. And he was a former Vatican translator, and I'm actually a direct descendant of the original Bible translator in English, William Tyndall. Bible translation is so important.
No way.
Yeah, and I actually think he was an experiencer, and I think that's probably what motivated him. He was burned at the stake for
What?
translating the Bible into English. Yeah, it was a huge defiance against the King of England and the Pope at the time, because all of the Bibles were in Latin, and you would have to pay a Catholic priest to read to you a couple passages out of the Bible to
And
put
that was their kind of like their foothold on the knowledge.
And it was their bread and butter too. Yes. And the Bibles were huge. The Bibles at that time were these big giant tomes that were chained down in the churches. So when William Tyndall, who would have been my uncle, and I've got the family pattern, and that's my last name is Tyndall. So he spent his whole life learning all of the Hebrew, the Greek, the Latin, to be able to translate it into English. And that was the time that the printing press came out. So not only did he translate it into English in defiance of the King of England and the Pope, he had to flee to Germany to have it mass printed. And it was the first pocket Bible. He printed the first, pocket Bible. And one of his famous quotes was, I want the boy who plows the field to be able to read the word of God. And I think he was an experiencer to have been that motivated and to give his life for it, because the King Henry VIII had him burned at the stake. They strangled him. First they put him in jail for 6 months, and then they burned him at the stake. So he's a Protestant martyr. And so anyways, I was going back to Mauro Biglino. Sorry, Bible translators. So one of the books that I highly recommend right now is Gods of the Bible by Mauro Biglino. You can get English translations. If you look him up on YouTube, he only speaks Italian. He was a Vatican Bible translator. And quite literally, the word for spirit was mistranslated. The original Hebrew word for spirit was ruah. And if you look at the pictograph of ruah, it is quite literally, I should have brought a picture. It is quite literally a craft over water that looks like that. That is the pictograph.
Can you spell it?
Yep. Here you go.
RU-A. Okay. Oh
Yep.
my God.
And so that is the word that was translated in the Bible as spirit. But clearly it looks like it should be craft, but they didn't have a word for craft. So that has huge implications. It wasn't the Holy Spirit giving people messages. It was the Holy Craft giving people messages. I mean, it changes everything. It's so fascinating. I read this full time. I wish I could just get a degree, but there's no degree in, exo-biblical studies yet. If there is, up.
Yeah, yet. I honestly think that in the next 5 to 7 years, there will be a degree that you can obtain or that you will be able to obtain. But that is wishful thinking. I want to get into a little bit about abductions. Um, if if abductions, and I think I was the first person, maybe, I don't know, I haven't really researched it too far, but I was the first person that I know of to ask a sitting Congress member what Congress could do if they found out that abductions were taking place, and his answer was just simply, "What could we do?" Um, what are your thoughts on the abduction phenomenon and why it's been really left out of the conversation?
I think there are a multitude. I don't think that's just one answer. I think there are multiple reasons for that. Um, I think I think that there have been some pretty horrible things done by people to other people under cover of aliens. I believe that that's true. I've seen a lot of injuries, a lot, and a lot of illnesses. Now, that's the part that that's the part that they don't want to talk about. That's what's really hot. That has the intelligence community dancing around this whole thing. Okay,
The
but
criminal activity that may surround the secrecy.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And it's never going to be prosecuted. It will never be acknowledged. I understand why it was done. I mean, we have foreign adversaries who engage in all kinds of unethical things all the time, and we have to keep up with that. I mean, I understand it. Okay, it doesn't make it right, but I think that's been hidden inside of the alien abduction community.
Yeah, and I think if we were to move forward, a truth and reconciliation process would be something that we should consider, because we're like I've said from the day one of this podcast, we are going to have to meet the military industrial complex halfway. And if we go into this pointing fingers and holding jail time over their heads, they're not gonna talk to us because they're not gonna incriminate themselves.
Yeah, nobody's going to jail. That's why a lot of people have talked about amnesty. Okay, fine. But I still don't. The only reason, well, to answer your question, so that's the first part about abductions. Okay, I think that they've hidden some really horrible things there. Okay, but I speculation. Okay, second, I think that there have been interactions between us, and I call it an ancient advanced presence. I understand NHI is the terminology right now, but I call it an ancient advanced presence. And there has been interaction between, humans and this ancient advanced presence going back all the way to, the garden. I mean, even in
Mm.
Genesis, so you're not even a couple paragraphs into Genesis, and it literally says the gods, plural, were walking through the garden. Um, so they have been interacting. I think they were. I think we were genetically manipulated by them. I think that's what happened. There's a lot of really good ancient texts to back that up. And just yesterday, I saw that they're going to be able to use AI to read a lot of these ancient Sumerian texts just as quickly as, English or Spanish or anything else. That's going to be huge because I think there are only four
Yes.
people in the world who can read cuneiform right now. So that is going to be a treasure trove of information. I think they've been interacting with us for a very long time. And it's not just one, I view them as a group of very advanced scientists who had, ethical dilemmas just like we did, well, was
Mm.
it ethical to make a new creation? And some of them said no, and some of them said, well, yeah, and we're having those same ethical arguments right now with our own creation, which is AI. Will it be smarter than us? Should we even do this? How dangerous is this? So I think we're at a crossroads right now where we can sort of understand the same thought processes somebody else might have gone through if they created us. And so I think they've been interacting with us for, since the beginning. It's pretty well documented in every religious text. They were described as God stories.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you know, um, we talk about flying craft and almost all of these ancient texts, craft that or thing, flight, often represented, like with the Anunnaki, with wings. But could that mean, could that have been just misappropriation, right? Like they could fly. It doesn't mean they had wings, much like
Right.
we describe angels. Angels were never described as having wings, but in all sculptures and most sculptures, they're depicted with wings. And that's because they have the ability of flight. Now, could that be, on a broader scale with this whole thing? I think so. And there again, when you look at it with this lens, I think there's even biological evidence. The jump in our brain capacity,
Yes.
our brain size doubled in the cosmic scale overnight.
Yeah, the missing link has been, the biggest thorn in the side of, archaeology and, genetics forever.
Mainstream genetics, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm convinced that that's what it is. And I think they know this. I think it's just a matter, you know, science especially changes very slowly. Just the peer review process alone, takes years.
Well,
Um,
there's a funny thing with that I heard, and it's um, science. s- Uh, it's something about like science is waiting for the next generation to die off, basically, right? It's always waiting for the old generation to die off so the new ones can come in, with the more modern views and the more, I don't know, it was something to that degree. I just butchered it. It wasn't funny when I said it. I clearly fumbled that.
no,
And yeah,
fine.
so
No,
but
that's exactly true. Like Kissinger's death, I think that is going to be huge because he came. My understanding, and I don't have a PhD in this, so if I misquote, I do apologize. But my understanding is that he did have contact with the Nazis. It was the Nazis who were doing all of this research in the first place. We know that we brought those guys over in paperclip. They went into NASA,
paperclip, yeah.
Los Alamos. They went into all of our, so they brought that stuff. And then Kissinger was involved with Army Air Corps, who was the intelligence prior to, the Air Force and the CIA. So it's my understanding that Kissinger had a lot to do with the truth embargo, as Bassett would say. And, so I think what you just said, there's so much validity to it. As the old guard kind of passes on, we've got new generations of leadership now who have some different views on things. And I think that that's going to lead to a lot of progress. And
Hmm.
there are a lot of other factors too. We're going to into we're already in a major war, and
we're
I don't.
we're teetering on World War III right now.
Yeah. So, I expect, every war brings out new technology. It was the
Uh,
military, it's the internet, and I
yeah.
think this war is going to be very different. I think it's going to be a space war. I think we might see some technology. think there might be some military. Well, Gary McKinnon, he uncovered the Navy space fleet. Is
What?
that real? You know?
Yeah, the non-terrestrial officers
Yes.
and that whole thing. Yeah. Could that be real? Like I don't I live in a world where that is such a possibility. Like
Yeah.
that would make it would make total sense that there was this secret space program and it was run by what may be coming back now. This breakaway civilization, because that's what it would be inevitably become, is a breakaway civilization. And could it be them from the past coming back? This is um man, Mike Masters. Michael, is it Michael Masters?
That sounds familiar. Yeah,
I think
there's
the future human hypothesis, where it's us from the future coming back.
yeah, so that's actually, I think that originated with Dr. Jack Sarfati, because I had the great
I
pleasure.
have, I think, not to cut you off. I am very sorry for that,
You're fine.
but I believe in February I'm going to be flying out and doing an interview with him. Obviously, Jack is very eccentric, so maybe you could
I love
help me with
him.
that.
Oh, I want to
May,
go with you. I love him. He's
but
wonderful.
if you
I
if you
had
want if you want, I'll fly you with me there.
Okay. I would love. Where are you going? Are you going to London?
No, San Francisco.
Oh, to San Francisco. So he's
Yeah,
back.
so
Okay.
we
Yeah.
we timed it because I can't I don't no I don't have the time to fly to London, but
Yeah,
the
it's
time
pretty involved.
we timed it so that he'd be back in San Francisco. I could fly to San Francisco. But we'll talk about let's talk about that. Let's talk about that after.
Okay. Yeah.
All
So
right.
I had the great privilege as a young UFO researcher to have access to Dr. Sarfati 10, 15 years ago. And
Uh
I remember he told me before he went public with this, he specifically told me, he said, Teresa, this is us from the future. They're time travelers. And at the time, I was young, and I was a young mom, so I wasn't doing this full time. But it, I've wrestled with that for years now. And that's probably one of the best hypotheses that I have come up with yet, because it does not matter, or that I have encountered yet. Because it doesn't matter when time travel is invented, it will have always existed. I mean, and then it's even possible that all of these gods in the past, and, the religions, that could be us who went back. I mean, it's so, and then there's a great book. It's called Time Loops. This is another great book that I highly recommend.
yeah,
Are you familiar with it?
I am familiar with it. Yes.
It's a fantastic book. So then once you start talking about time travel, it really gets into, well, what happened first, and what
The
influenced
chicken or
what.
the egg. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, so if we go back in time to try to influence things to make it differently, and that's all recorded in the book as like Ezekiel's wheel and all of that,
And
did it change anything?
this could account for the Mandela effect. This could
Yeah.
account for um deja vu.
Yes.
Um it could account for many things. And it really could. If you there's a circle that you can draw around the classic gray alien. Now, hear me out on this. And we'll be wrapping up momentarily. And again, uh, at this point, you're always welcome back on the show. This has been
Thank you.
very engaging conversation. Um, so you look at the first descriptions of an alien, right? Now, those get reported to Project Blue Book, right? So, Project Blue Book then ends, and Dr. Hynek consults on Close Encounters. Close Encounters with Steven Spielberg depicts the classic gray alien. Now, Whitley Strieber also does with Communion and on the cover of the book, but then we get this big boom of the classic gray alien archetype. So does art imitate life, or did life imitate art? Because these you can be all traced back to original experiencer testimony.
And it's even older than that. If you look at, I think it's specifically the Hopis. They have the
Yeah, the
mythology,
sky people.
the ant people. Well, they actually have the ant people, and at
Yes.
the
Oh,
end,
sorry. The ant people. Yes.
yeah,
Sorry.
and the ant people are almost the exact description of a gray alien entity creature. And at the end of every world, and I think there have been 3 or 4, and we're about to go into another. At the end of every world, the
Scares
ant
the shit out of me.
people. Well, I know. I mean, but we're doing all we can to try to. Well, let me finish this. So at the end of every world, the ant people save the Hopi people and they take them underground until things stabilize again. And then they bring them back out and they tell them to go out into all the directions of the world and repopulate again. And so it's even older than that. And you can't write it off. You can see it in cave paintings all over the world. Um, and I think there are probably a lot of different entities. You've got cat people who are documented in the Bible, the lion men of Moab, who were known as the Ariels, and Ariels were the angels of God. Certainly you see cat or lion people in ancient
Really?
Egypt. Yeah. Yeah, I
Well,
mean, it's in
the
your Bible.
Sphinx, I
Look up
guess.
the lion men of Moab. They were
Okay.
God's angel warriors, and they were known as the Ariels. And then what's interesting about that is the aerial school phenomenon. And when I pointed out to Randy, I said, "You do realize what an aerial is, and the school is the aerial school." And he said, "Well, no." And I said, "An aerial, the Ariels were the the lion faced men of Moab, the the angels of God." So was that an accident that it happened at that school? But I do want to say a final note, because I feel you, especially
Wow,
because
that's
I got so many of these downloads about this time that we are in now and about the time to come. And I got these downloads a good 10 years ago and 15 years ago. And I've been living with this, knowing that this was going to come. I don't have a red phone to DOD or the White House to say, oh my gosh, watch out, the world's about ready to go to hell. It's been very upsetting. And a lot of experiencers have had that catastrophic imagery. And I want them to know they're not alone. And yeah, here we are. It is happening. And I think the best thing that we can do is come together, because just carrying that is very scary. We have each other. And I think it's more important now than ever than to come together to support each other. And, the more people that we can help to open their eyes to this new worldview, because it's coming, it's here. It's here. And a lot of
yes.
people had a hard time with this because we've been very isolated. But a lot of people, and I know everybody's tired of hearing about ontological shock, but it's very real. I experienced it myself. I was not prepared with my scientific background to arrive at scripture for the answers I was looking for. It was uncomfortable for me. It was shocking. So I think the best thing we can do is come together and be supportive of each other and do what we're doing, and hold our government's feet to the fire and tell them we don't want any more freaking wars. We want to know, we know you have things that would benefit the world. We're not happy with the way things are going, and this is a democracy, damn it.
Yes. And it really needs to start acting like one, because we are asleep at the wheel. We are about to be overtaken by China in GDP. They are buying assets with their Belt and Road Initiative, and we are just asleep at the wheel right now, and it's very, very alarming at the things that are going on around us. And um I just, I don't know. It gives me like really like a terrible anxiety thinking about the current state of affairs. And like, I know Joe Rogan's been talking about this lately, but for like 6 months longer than him, I've been talking about it and saying that like I can't go to bed at night sometimes because like, yeah, I might be safe here in Boston, Massachusetts, but the 30-year-old guy in Ukraine or in Gaza or in Israel or anywhere that's this
In
nonsensical
LA.
fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nonsensical land over land and man-made borders. Like it's so ridiculous, and it's gotta stop. It's gotta stop. We gotta raise our awareness and our consciousness and our vibration as a society. And we need to get over this phase of warring apes with thermonuclear weapons because we could really do some damage. Um, and we could do the ultimate damage at this point. And there's
We
no
can
turning
destroy the
back.
entire world. Unquestionable. We have MAD, mutually assured destruction. If we go to nuclear war, that's going to be it for the world. I mean, it really is. So we cannot have this religious tribal warfare. We just
Yeah.
can't. And I think one of the best ways to get over that is to say, I understand your perspective, of what you're saying, but and I think that you've been influenced by an extraterrestrial presence, and maybe let's take an updated view of all of the books. I think that's what really needs to happen, because these religious tribal warfares have to stop, because we are all going to suffer greatly. And I think that this is a good first step. People have been dying over religion since forever.
Since the
And
conception.
yeah, and I'm not saying do away with religion, but I'm just saying, if we can, and it's interesting, I've had a lot of Twitter spaces with atheists and theists. And I always wonder who's going to have the easiest time with disclosure that, these religious uh, texts were,
Right.
encountered with others that were recorded as God stories. And it's been interesting. Both have been pretty. I've seen a lot of shock. People are just like, oh my gosh, but that, there's a stages of grief. And I think we have to be mindful that most people who get exposed to this are going to be in some stage of acceptance or grief. And I think it's very important not to ridicule those people and to be as supportive as possible. And I mean, even I had a horrible knee-jerk reaction. You're psyoping me, and I can't do this, and oh. But I came out of that and realized, yeah, that's what's been happening. And I think it's
It's
very important.
reality.
It's reality, and I experienced it. It was horrible, and it's hard to go to your therapist and say, well, I'm suffering ontological shock because I just found out the gods of the Bible are really aliens, because then so there's not a good support. So I just want to encourage. I mean, I'm sure you can understand, anybody can identify with that, right? Like you're not going to go to your therapist and say that, even
Because
if you
then
do.
they're like, all right, so we're gonna up the dose of Xanax on you.
You're
Can
going on
we
antipsychotic meds, and
here's an
so I
SSRI. Yeah.
yeah, of course. Yeah, you're gonna come out of there with a bunch of prescriptions you don't need. What you need is social support. And again, I put this out in every interview that I do, and I get people who reach out to me. Literally, I get people who reach out to me every day for the past 15 years, and I'm always willing to dedicate my time. I'm not a licensed mental health professional, but I do have that experience, and I've talked to a lot of experiencers. I'm pretty educated in this. I I volunteer my time to talk to people who have questions, are anywhere along the path, are struggling, please, if you're struggling, reach out to somebody. And I just want to say anybody can always reach out to me.
That's amazing. I'm gonna put a link in the description um, below for your how what's the best way that they can contact you?
So my Twitter handle is what is my Twitter handle?
It was
uh,
it's at Serp, Serpent Stop, no, at Tyndall Review.
yeah, okay, and that's Tindal review. My website got hacked, so I just gave up on that. Or I can be emailed at Tyndall, T as in Tom, INDAL review at gmail.com, and I can be reached there.
Beautiful and amazing. You thank you so much for coming on the show today. Um,
Yeah, for having me.
yeah, I had a last minute cancellation, and you know, I'm I think I'm pretty booked through January, I think. And
Oh, good for
um
you.
yeah, well, I mean, it is what it is. It's just, about doing your due diligence. And
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends that like Philip Mantle who are always sending me contacts, and now you're a friend, and we do need to, so stick around after the music plays, and we'll chat for a second before we have to go. But um thank you, like I said, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And we hope to have many conversations with you in the future. You're very well versed in this, and I would love to go further into the religious theology, and how it connects to UFOs, and what David Grush is saying right now. Um, Actually, really quick, with David Grush, one last final question before we leave. Um, the part about the treaty, what do you think about that?
I don't know. It's really speculate. It's hard to say. You can only speculate, and give your best educated guess. Yeah, is it plausible? Sure. What evidence do we have of it? Well, we have what he said. How important is that point? I'm not so sure that that's really as important as I look at it this way. After I was on the Hill, I was in DC for 20 years. And I was one of the first registered lobbyists. I was on the Hill with, and I'd go to dinner with everybody at Congress and their aides. Everybody had a UFO story. Okay. I mean, one woman actually broke down in tears telling me about her UFO story. But then I realized I don't think the answers are coming from government. And I think that's true for most things. And I think that's true especially for this. So I think if people really want to learn about this, I found what works best for me is to look pre-industrial revolution, because experiences and encounters pre-industrial revolution, you're just ruling out DOD. You're ruling out DOD interests. You're ruling out military interests.
Misinformation. You're ruling out a lot of that propaganda.
Yes, because right now, right now it's almost with the technology that we have and with the interests and interrelated and intercompeting interests that we have, it is impossible to say what is what. And you
Yeah,
can
I mean,
speculate all day, but you're just spinning your wheels if you do that. So I found for me what works best is to look pre-industrial revolution, which most of that you're going to find in religious texts, and and make up your own mind from there. Don't look to government to give you permission to believe in something,
yeah,
ever, anything.
especially if and you've had your own experience that has changed you. Um, don't look for government validation, because
Yeah.
if that's what you're looking for, you might not get it in your lifetime, and you're better off, like, even with all the advancement we're making, there's no there's no guarantee still. So, there's better things that you can do with your time and higher achievements that you can do within yourself. That will they'll do much more for you than the president coming out and saying we're not alone.
Yeah.
So
And I don't
Teresa,
think that's going to happen. I don't think
right,
that's realistic.
right,
Maybe, I mean, I'd be shocked if it does, and I'd like to be wrong on that. So I just encourage
me
everybody
too.
to do their own research and, look at texts previous and, follow what's happening in Congress, but don't hang your heart on it.
Yeah, and I think that's a very, very good way to end it. Don't hang your heart on it. Teresa, stick around in the back for just a moment while we head out. Guys, make sure to leave a review. It's free. It costs you $0. Leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It helps so much. And again, it's free. Also free, sharing. It's caring. Help me out. Share the show on social media with your friends, your families, your enemies, the Greys, Nordics. I don't care. I really don't. Also, if you want to help support the show further, become a member on Patreon. It's newly revamped. And that's it. We'll see you guys next time. I love you, and we'll see you on the other side.
You guys, stop.